All right, to test out our theory and explore Part A, we're going to begin by looking at a table of the height and arm span of students in a CMP class. So as you can see, we have the height up here on the top row, and we have the arm span measured down here on the bottom row. Do you think the data supports the claim that arm span and height are about equal? Part A says we're going to analyze the data to test our ideas. Number 1 says plot the height and the arm span data on a coordinate graph. The resulting graph is called a scatter plot. So you may know what a scatter plot is before we get into this, but how we're going to do that is we're just going to take all of the data from that table and put it on a graph. Now I've labeled each axis for you, X and Y, and we have the numbers on the axes. But we don't know which goes in which, or which label goes on which axis. In the past, our top one has always been our X, and it is going to continue to be our X. The bottom here is going to continue to be our Y. So on our X-axis, we can label that with height. And on the Y-axis, we can label that arm span. When we are plotting these points, we always need to look at the height first. So the first one is 56 and 54. So I'm going to go over to 56, and I'm going to go up to 54, and I'm going to put a dot right there. That's my first point in my scatter plot. Second one is 57 and 57. Okay, that's halfway between 56 and 58. And halfway between 56 and 58, there's my next point. And then 57 and 54. Again, another one at 57, but this time it's at 54. So a scatter plot is just going to contain a lot of different dots. Once we put all of the dots on there, we'll be able to see if there's a pattern or if we can draw a line through them or whatever. But we need to make sure we get all of these points on here first. So pause this video and do that right now. All right, number 2. Do you think the scatter plot supports the claim that arm span and height are about equal for most people? So now you're going to take a look at your completed scatter plot once you finish that, and you're going to see if it makes sense that arm span and height are about equal for most people based on the student's data in here. Number 3, if each student in the class had arm span S equal to height H, what equation would relate the two variables? So this time they're talking about S is going to be equal to height. So I'll give you the equation here. If S is equal to height, here's our equation. That would mean that if the span was 55, the height would also be 55. If the span was 60 inches, the height would also be 60 inches. Whatever the span is would be equal to the height of the person. Now they want us to graph that equation on the scatter plot. So you are going to figure out what would a graph look like if the span equals the height. What data points, if any, does your line pass through? Explain how arm and height are related in those points. Choose several data points that are not on your line and explain how arm span and height are related in each case. How do you describe the relationship shown on the graph?